Welcome back to the Keeping It Real with KC podcast. I, of course, am your host, KC Phoenix. And yeah, my other phone, would reply back to my text as soon as I start recording. But anyways, before I go any further, kirwkc.com, main podcasting platform. This podcast is carried on Apple, Spotify, Google, iHeartRadio, Pandora, Overcast, Bullhorn, Amazon Music, Audible, and several other podcasting platforms. Please feel free to listen to this podcast on whatever platform is most convenient for you. KIRWKC on all the social media platforms. So, yeah, I haven't done a daily thought in a while. This is one of my daily thoughts. I meant to upload this sooner, obviously, by the title, but I didn't get around to it. I didn't make any time for it. So I'm making time now. Also, I'm doing another daily thought too that is somewhat related, but not so much. But these are very, very personal, I guess you could say candid daily thoughts. Some people might say TMI daily thoughts, but I'm fine with that because my listeners know that I'm pretty much very transparent when it comes to this in doing my podcast. So, where to start? My Firebirds more than likely already know that I am a huge fan, admirer, someone who appreciates their resume and their dedication when they were here. And that person would be Whitney Houston. When I was a kid, I loved Whitney Houston. Like anything Whitney Houston. And it was so crazy because I didn't even know Whitney Houston was Whitney Houston. And I know some people are like, wait, what? No. So let me give you the story. My cousin, my mother's first cousin, because my grandmother and her mother, my grandmother and her sister, which my aunt, which is the only living aunt out of all of the sisters, because my grandmother passed away, my other aunt passed away too. So this aunt, which is my mother's first cousin's mother, she's the only sister left out of the three sisters. She's still alive to this day, which I'll probably check on her because I haven't spoken to her in a minute. But I was over at my cousin's house and I happened to notice the Whitney Houston CD, but I knew of the Whitney Houston who sang "I'm Your Baby Tonight" Miracle because I didn't really know who Whitney Houston was until the 90s. And that's because my mother bought the "I'm Your Baby Tonight" CD. And then I listened to it and I was like, oh, I love this. Listen to it all the time. I was like, Whitney Houston is awesome. Well, I was at my cousin's house and I had seen Whitney Houston's second album, Whitney. I knew the name Whitney Houston, but I didn't know she was the one that sang those songs on that CD. So I listened to the CD because the thing is I said to my cousin, like, oh, Whitney Houston. I was like, oh, let me borrow this. Let me borrow this. And my cousin was like, you can have that. That's not, you can have it. I was like, okay, fine. So then I took it because I listened to, I think it was I Want to Dance with Somebody. And when I heard the first song off the CD, I was like, oh my God, that's her? Because I didn't know the Whitney Houston from "I'm Your Baby Tonight" sang "I Want to Dance with Somebody." I didn't know she sang "Where the Broken Hearts Go." I didn't know that was her singing it because I just didn't make the connection for whatever reason that it's the same voice. I knew the songs, but I didn't know that was Whitney Houston singing the song. So, yeah, that's kind of how that happened. And when I found out about the second album, because somebody had told me, well, that's her second album. I'm like, well, what's her first album? So then that's when I found the first album. And I'm like, oh, she's the one who sings that song again. So then I'm getting all these Whitney Houston albums, and then I found out that she did the One Moment in Time for the Olympics. So then I go all over town, and I found it at this little hole in the wall record store. And I was like, okay, got that. Bought the entire Olympic CD for just one song, One Moment in Time. And everything Whitney Houston, I followed ever since. Some of my Firebirds know this. My longtime listeners know this. I knew so much about Whitney Houston, and I was so into Whitney Houston that I had people in my middle school believing that I was her cousin because I knew so many personal things about her because I watched lots of interviews, read the stuff, whatever. And there were people in my middle school that actually believed she was my cousin. So, yeah. And, as her career went on, I began to love her even more because if you haven't watched the Whitney Houston, I guess you could say biopic or whatever you want to call it, the I Want to Dance with Somebody movie is actually really good. I enjoyed it. I was pleasantly surprised because I honestly didn't think it was going to be that good. And my mother actually called me up this past weekend, and I missed her call because I was occupied at the time. But I called her back the next day, and she was like, I didn't want anything. I just wanted to tell you that Whitney Houston movie, it was actually good. I was like, yeah, it was. And then we had a little talk about that, whatever. But one thing she mentioned in the movie was that she was giving the persona of polished, America's sweetheart girl. But that really wasn't who she was. And I told the story too. Somebody tried to warn me about that and I would not believe them. Because they were telling me it was this girl who was in the industry. I wasn't in that competition. I went with my god sister at the time because me and my two god sisters, we all met at a modeling agency when we used to model. And, as we were modelers. I would say one of the three of us, even though we all got assignments and stuff, one of the three of us, she was the one who would be considered to have made it, modeling wise. As in walked in fashion show for Anna Sui, been in magazines, been in videos, so on and so forth. But that's whatever. And kudos to her for sticking to her dream because she just moved to New York. She was like, I'm going for this, and she went to New York and did it. So always kudos to her. But we all met through the agency, and I had to go to a competition with one of my god sisters for her because basically I took her to the competition. So I was tagging along. One of the girls that was also there for the competition, she knew a lot of people in the industry. She was really good friends with, and I'm not going to give away names and stuff, but she was really good friends with an actor on a hit TV show. And there was proof. She had pictures and everything of them hanging out together, whatever, and stuff. And she was giving details about people, that stuff that's been going on, the things that have been going on about Diddy right now, Puff Daddy, Diddy, Sean, whatever you want to call him. She already told me the deal on that how long ago was that? That was a long time ago. That was like probably 20 years ago that she already told me the deal on that. She was telling me the deal on other stuff. One of the people that came up was Whitney Houston. And her friend was a producer on the My Love Is Your Love album. So, and she was talking about how nice Whitney Houston was, but at the same time, don't piss her off because Whitney will straight up meet you outside. And I was like, what do you mean meet you outside? As in she will take off her earrings, put Vaseline in her hair, and she will get ready to whoop your ass. I was like, Whitney Houston is not like that. She's like, okay. She's like, Bobby is the nice one, which I met Bobby Brown on my birthday, 2015, I think. It was at Del Sol Luna or whatever you call it, over off Ventura. One of the bars off Ventura. And the only reason I was there is because the girl I worked with at the time, I found out her birthday was the same day as mine. And I was like, oh, wow. So there was this birthday thing going on, mostly for her, but she invited me. And usually I don't go to events and stuff. As as my listeners know, I'm a homebody. So, I'm very true to my astrological sign of Cancer. I'm a homebody. So I don't go out like that. And she was like, no, you got to come. Da, da, da. I was like, okay, you know what? I'll go ahead and do it, because she was such a sweetheart. And I really miss her. She actually went to Italy. And when she came back, she brought a lot of people back, myself included, souvenirs. I still have that souvenir that she gave me. So, yeah, she was just a sweetheart. So I was like, okay, I'll go. And then I went, and then Bobby Brown ended up being there that night, and then we ended up talking to him, blah, 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 blah. Back to the other story. So the girl was saying, no, Bobby's the nice one. Whitney is the one that will straight up go off. And I was just like, Whitney Houston is not like that. I'm like, she is prim and proper, whatever. She's like, okay, believe that if you want to. As the years went on, then what she was talking about came out. And then after watching that movie, it kind of all makes sense and stuff. So yeah, and I just enjoyed her even more with her personality, especially that interview with Wendy Williams. That interview was epic. If you have not listened to the Whitney Houston, Wendy Williams interview, that is required listening for everybody on planet Earth. When I tell you that interview is a classic, and Whitney went in. So, yeah, all of the stuff came out, and it just made me like her even more. And it was like, oh, her voice declined over the years. It wasn't the drugs, it was the smoking. And even Clive Davis has talked about that. It was the smoking. That same stuff happened with Aretha Franklin, because everybody was like, Aretha Franklin's voice isn't what it used to be. Aretha Franklin was a chain smoker. That's why. So yeah, it wasn't the drugs, it was the smoking. And it was a little bit disheartening where she wasn't at her peak anymore vocally, but she was still singing. And even her not being at her peak, she was still better than some people at their peak. Just saying. So that incident happened where she's no longer with us on February the 11th, which, crazy enough, is Brandy's birthday. And her and Brandy are really close. So now when Brandy's birthday rolls around, that's something that she has to think about. And it's sort of that way with me, because this is where the other part of February 11th ties in for me personally. The love of my life, the only person I've ever been in love with, his birthday is on February the 11th. So when February the 11th rolls around every year, I have to, I automatically think about Whitney Houston, and I automatically think about the love of my life, the only person I've ever truly been in love with, as in truly, madly, deeply. I've loved a lot of people over the years, but as in been in love with, that's the only one. As in madly, truly, deeply, that's the only one. And I always wondered, that old saying, it's better to have loved and lost than have not loved at all. Something to that effect. And I'm just like, that sounds like a bunch of BS. It sounds like a bunch of BS. But over time, after the sting doesn't hurt as much, it does make sense, because now you can recognize it and know what a powerful thing true love is. The reason that I'm not with this person is because it wasn't reciprocated. On his end, it was just more of, let's have a good time, don't want to be tied down. And plus, he was carrying baggage too. And I mean, we all carry baggage. I mentioned that on one of my daily thoughts. It's just, how much baggage do you want to allow on your plane when you're dating someone? Because we all carry baggage. But for me, due to his insecurities and stuff, and not willing to commit, I was just kind of in, there's a song by Reba McEntire, which, if you don't listen to country music, I totally get it. Some people are not into country music, but there's one country artist that you should absolutely listen to, whether you like country music or not, and her name is Reba McEntire. So, just telling you. But there's the song that Reba McEntire has called Consider Me Gone. And in the chorus, It says, if I'm not the one thing you can't stand to lose, if I'm not the arrow to the heart of you, if you don't get drunk off my kiss, if you think you can do better than this, well, I guess we're done. Let's not drag this on. Consider me gone. And that was my energy. So when it comes to that type of stuff, that's why it didn't work out, because I want to be in a relationship with someone who wants what I want, in the sense of wanting long-term, wanting commitment, wanting monogamy, so on and so forth. Those type of things. And I'll tell you straight up, if I'm not in love with you, you will not get that from me. I'll eventually be like, okay, yeah, we probably need to break up. Because I'm not there. So, and that can be his thing too, where he just wasn't there, but he didn't want to break up. He wanted to continue, I guess, for the physical and whatever else. But yeah, made the decision to walk away. And those two things I do think about when February the 11th rolls around. Now, like my dad said, the old saying, time heals everything. And again, as each year passes, the sting doesn't hit as much. You know, like the Sarah Evans song, which is another country artist, Stronger. Check that song out too sometime. But yeah, February the 11th is just always a moment for me. But I've gotten better at absorbing everything that comes along with it. So yeah, time heals everything. We have these moments in life where they were painful moments, and where they may bring back the pain with the memories. Like some people might get PTSD when certain dates roll around, or certain scents, because there's a scent. It's a cologne, and the scent is in other things too, but it's specifically a cologne that was sold at the Gap. I don't think Gap sells it anymore, but when I smelled that scent, I think of the first person I met at the club, because that is what he used to wear. But you know, it's just like scents can bring things back, dates can bring things back, foods can bring things back. Memories are something else. And sometimes you can get, what's the word? I don't want to say caught up, overwhelmed. That's the word. Thank you. You can get overwhelmed by certain memories sometimes. But over time, it'll get better. You won't forget, but yeah, you'll remember and stuff. And I'm sure that you'll survive whatever the memory is connected to, whether it's a date like February the 11th, or whether it's a food like cheesecake, or whether it's a scent like cologne from the Gap. Whatever it is, I'm sure you'll continue to survive that too. All right, and that is my daily thought. Oh, kirwkc.com, podcast everywhere. You know the deal. Be blessed.